And so today we are here to talk about that ministerial search journey, whether you are on it or not. It's a good idea to just brush up on these skills every once in a while because we never know what life is going to throw our way. So it's a good idea to stay abreast of this kind of stuff. At BWIM, we know that navigating this path can sometimes feel like a challenge. There are usual challenges that all candidates face, like lack of communication from a search committee, standing. Was that somebody needing something? Nope. Okay. Um, to understanding what a ministry setting wants. That's things everybody face. But as women, there are other challenges that we face in this process. There are gender biases that we know are going to be present. There is resistance to considering women at all in some groups. And we may have less obvious experience than our male colleagues because we've had a lack of opportunity. So what do we do with all of this? How do we address these things when we're applying to a job? Because it can make the job search less than appealing when we think about all those things. But fear not, we're going to talk about these challenges and about how we can prepare so that we feel more confident going into that. So first, we're going to talk about resume, which is often the first impression any candidate makes to a potential church or ministry. To develop a standout resume, you have to have a few things. You have to understand yourself. You have to understand your audience. You have to understand the ministry you are pursuing. And you need to know the skills and experience that are most valued for that field. When you have all of that, you can then engage really well in this job search process. First, we're going to talk about, I'm just going to touch on those things that go in a resume. If you have questions, I've got a few slides on resumes. We'll take care of those questions at the end. So first, you've got a ministry objective. This is not required. I did not often put that on my personal resumes, but I have seen them done very, very well. It's just 1 to 2 sentences that very concisely summarizes your vocational goals, your calling, and how those align with the job and organization that you're applying to. So it is likely that your ministry objective will change from application to application. That's something that will change on your resume. Second is where you list your education and training. I imagine you all know this, but no high school goes on that list, just secondary degrees. Certifications, so maybe you got a certification in youth ministry or pastoral care outside of your traditional education, put that on there. If you have clinical pastoral education training, put that on there. Anything that is relevant to the job you're applying to, you want to make sure you include. Relevant experience. Now, that's all the stuff that you list after each job. And what I want you to focus on when you write those are the responsibilities that you had and the accomplishments that you made. So, what were you required to do for the job? And what did you achieve in that job? And then the last part of all that is you want to put numbers to it whenever you can. Did you handle a $1 million budget? Did you have 40 members in your youth ministry? Did you plan 3 retreats over the course of a year for a particular group? You want to make sure that you're adding those numbers so that they have a scope of what it is you've done, the full scope of that. Next is publications. If you have any publications, this is a great place to put those. If you have written for anything that is relevant to the job, you can include that here. Leadership, volunteerism, and awards. I generally put all of that in one section. In my own personal life, there has never been enough that I've wanted to include to give them each their own section. However, everyone comes to this ministry stuff in a different way. So if the majority of your experience has been your volunteer work, then I would encourage you to make a whole section for that so people can see how you've been giving of yourself in ministry. Otherwise, you can lump all of those together and just find a way to be very consistent in how you talk about them. Skills. This is one of those areas where people never really know what to put. So, certainly there was a time not too long ago when we would encourage people to put word processing and Excel and things like that. Um, a lot of that is assumed now. However, in church and ministry settings, I will tell you, and it doesn't mean don't include that information, but know that that's not going to give you an edge. If you do have social media skills or video editing skills, that definitely will give you an edge when it comes to the skills section, because a lot of churches are realizing this is something they need to be able to know how to do. And that's not what they teach you how to do in seminary. So, and if you have those skills, that can definitely be a big help to you. Finally, you've got references. Now, whether you choose to include those in your application or not is going to be unique to your particular situation. But in that list of references, include women. I would say at least half of them should be women. And that's because women can speak more authentically to what it's like to be a woman as a reference, and they can know how to speak to a search committee in a way that men don't. So we really encourage you to make sure that you put women on that list. Okay, the next section that I want to talk about with your resume development is navigating this digital world in which we live. There's just a few tips that I want to make sure you have. The first is I want you to plan to save 2 versions in PDF format of your resume. One, you can put links in so that if you have a publication you want to link to, or if you have a sermon you want to link to, you can make that in your PDF file where the hiring people can click on that and use it. But you also want to have that traditional print resume, because I'm here to promise you, even if you tell them it's digital or it looks digital, it's going to get printed out at a church. It's going to get printed out and it's going to be handed around to everyone in the search committee. And there's a high chance of that happening. So what I would encourage you to do is save it in 2 formats, and one of them's clickable, one of them is not, so that you don't have any formatting issues. The second thing is I want you to print them both before you send them, if you can, because sometimes the formatting gets messed up when we print, and you want to make sure that when it comes out, it looks the way that it's supposed to look. The other tip that I want to tell you is when you save them, label it digital or traditional or printable. I would label it digital and printable, and include your name in that PDF file, because when they are sorting through all of their resumes, most people do not put their name on there. And so one, that puts your name in their eyes and in their brain, which is a good thing. And it's easy to find your resume, which makes it easy for them. And that is good for you too. It's little bitty things like this that can sometimes just be helpful. They help people remember you. And finally, if you have video of yourself teaching, giving speeches, doing your work, and you have the ability or a friend who can help you, put together a short reel of the work that you do, whether it has a talk over or if they can actually hear you, because that can help them get a sense of how you are in front of people and how you might be in front of their constituents or congregation. Okay. All right. The next thing with resumes that I want to make sure that we cover are those little bitty details. And I really do believe, this is my own personal, I can't give you statistics for this, but I really do believe that so much is in the details when it comes to a resume. And that's because if you're going through and something is spelled wrong or something is out of place, it will really stick out in a resume, and that's going to stick with the people who are reading it and deciding if they want to hire you. So the first thing that I would do is make sure you have read the job description very closely and you have done some research on how the church talks about itself or how the ministry talks about itself. You can find that on the website generally, and you want to use the words they use in anywhere that you can. So if you say community ministry and they say outreach, just change all your community ministries to outreach. You just want to make sure you're using the words they're using. Second, get a thesaurus or bookmark one on your computer. Or you can also just go and Google action verbs for resumes and then use that to go through your resume. And if you have the word create 3 times in a row, go and find other words so that you're giving, it makes it more readable. It makes it more active sounding, which is helpful. Speaking of active, you want to make sure that you write in active voice and not passive voice, because active voice seems more action oriented and leadership oriented when you're reading it, where passive voice does not give off that same kind of feeling. So you want to make sure that you use active voice and not passive voice. So then the last 2 things I'm going to say about these details are when you are researching the church or organization, of course, you're going to start with their website. I would go and I would read their mission and vision statement. If it's a nonprofit, see if you can find their annual report from because it'll tell you everything they did the year before. If you can talk to a former employee of this church or organization, that is also going to help you understand the place better. And finally, I would do an internet search to see if any kind of articles pop up that you want to know about that would be helpful in a positive or negative way. You might find that they won some kind of award or were highlighted for something good. You also might find some red flags. So it's always good to make sure that you do that research ahead of time. And then the second thing is that when you edit, I think it's very helpful to choose one thing to edit for and go all the way through it. So you might one time go through looking for all the passive voices and then changing them to active voice. And then you're going to go through again, looking only for spelling and grammar. And then go through again and see if there are any words you can take out. Because if you can take out a that or a this, it's just going to shorten everything up and tighten it up to make sure that you're taking the most advantage of that front resume page, which is prime real estate. And then you want to make sure you're editing for formatting. And then I would go back through and make sure that you have used the words in the job description as much as possible. You could add your own to that, but I think this is pretty good and it'll probably get you where you need to be. And of course, reach out to a friend because I am here to tell you I am going to miss my misspelled words every single time, but a friend will catch them. So, because I know what I'm expecting to read and then my brain will just see it. All right, the next thing I want to talk about with resumes is style. First, you do not need color. Now, if you want to use color, keep it minimal. It should only be there to enhance your resume. You don't want color on your resume to be the only thing that they remember about you. I remember that a resume came in to me when I was working at McAfee, and it was gorgeous. It was the prettiest resume I've ever seen. But I can't even tell you the name of the person who it was because I just remember it was just so pretty. But that was all that stood out to me in it. And so like nothing else about it stood out. And she might have been amazing. So that's just something to think about. You don't want that to overpower you. Consistency is more important than making sure you get the exact right format. So if you bold the names of the job you've had and you italicize the name of the company in one entry, you want to make sure you do that in every single entry. You just want to make sure that you're consistent all the way down because it makes reading the resume easier. And that's what you want to do. You want it to be very accessible to the people who are reading it and scanning through it. If you are using a hiring firm, or the church or ministry that you are applying to are using a hiring firm, I would encourage you to oversimplify your resume, because they're going to send it through a digital reader. And if they send it through a digital reader, it may be difficult for it to read if it has a lot of bells and whistles. But I will say that the most important thing about style is that the style that you do your resume in is going to tell them something about you. My resume tends to be very clean cut, very, I have some bolding and some italicizing in it, but that's about it. And that's because when I sit down to work, like I just want to kind of get down and get to it and get to work. And so that my resume looks like that. But if you have more flourish in your personality, especially when it comes to your work, it's okay to put some of that on your resume. Just make sure that it is not overshadowing you. So the next thing I want to address are cover letters. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here, even though it's probably my favorite part of the whole process. I think a cover letter is where you really get to shine. And I'm someone who really encourages you to really pay attention to those first couple of sentences. There is no rule for what that's supposed to look like. And so I approach a cover letter. It's probably, if it prints correctly, the cover letter will be the very first thing they read. And you want that first sentence to make them want to read more. That's the way that I look at it. I mean, that's the way that I approach cover letters. And it is where you can, well, we're going to go to the next thing. So the cover letter, it does have some things that need to be in it. You've got to have some kind of opening. You're going to want to address the people who are going to hire you. And this is where you can express the enthusiasm you have for the job and the ministry and its mission. You can make some kind of connection from yourself and your passion to their ministry that you are applying to. If you can find a way to make that connect, that's going to be really helpful. Highlight your alignment. So look for ways to show how your skills and experience align with what the organization needs. And that is what you want to include. That's a lot of what you want to include in that cover letter. How do your skills and experience meet the needs that this particular ministry has? This is another good place to make sure you're using that language from the job description. You also want to use your cover letter to demonstrate both your passion and your commitment. This is where you can use information you find in all of that research that you did. You can express passion for ministry in a way that connects with this organization, and demonstrate that you have a commitment to serving the organization's well-being, that you want to come on and be a part of the good work they're doing, or that you want to, you're excited about connecting in this way or that way. It shows that you did your homework, and it shows ways that you connect directly with them. It's a good place where you can use your unique voice, um, and um, and talk about the experiences you have, that connect with your mission and purpose. This is also somewhere where you can address things that might need to be addressed up front. Like maybe this is your first ministry job and you're coming out of a marketplace job, like you've been in finance, right? And so you need to explain like why you're switching career paths. This is a good place to talk about that. You don't want to give you don't want to give them an epic poem or anything, but a couple of sentences that say, God called me at this time in my life, and this is how I'm preparing, and that kind of thing. Um, it can also be a place to, if you think there's going to be concerns about a gap in your work, or if you began the first part of your life, maybe being a homemaker or doing caregiving for children or parents. you can talk about that in this section, um, and use it to show them experience you gain doing those things. So you don't address challenges in a way where you complain about the challenges that you've had. It's not a place to air that laundry. What it is, it's a place where you can show how you're addressing that. So, or what you learned from those challenges or obstacles. Does that make sense? I'm going to go ahead and see if there are any questions there about any of that. Okay. So the most important thing, honestly, I love writing a cover letter. I am glad to help you brainstorm your cover letter because I think it's a place where you can really help them see who you are. And the most important thing is to just be your beautiful self. That's what your cover letter is about. Certainly there are things you want to make sure that you get in there, but it's about showing who you are and capturing them with that. Okay, the next thing that I want to address is translating marketplace skills. We'll spend a little bit of time on here because we do have somebody who needed that. But again, there's more information in the toolkit if that's something that you need. So, but like I said, increasingly people are entering ministry and seminary in midlife. It ends up being a second vocation for a lot of people. And so learning how to articulate that previous experience in a way that church people or church people can understand it is going to help you when you're applying for those ministry positions. So there are ways that you can talk about the skills that you have and that you gained while you were doing that work, and put it in language that a church will understand. So your leadership skills that you learn working at an insurance company or at the bank or at the doctor's office. Did you manage teams? Did you delegate tasks or did you motivate colleagues? These kind of skills will translate to leading a congregation, overseeing ministries, and guiding volunteers. Do you see the difference? So manage teams can become leading a congregation, delegating tasks, overseeing ministry, motivate colleagues, guiding volunteers. It's just a different way to talk about it. Are you a skilled communicator or presenter or writer? These abilities, they are vital for preaching, leading worship services, and connecting with the congregation. Did you problem solve or do a lot of decision making, navigate complex challenges, or make data-driven decisions in your marketplace role? These skills are essential for addressing pastoral concerns, managing church finances, and finding creative solutions to problems that you may encounter. Organization and time management. Did you excel at project management or scheduling or meeting deadlines? This is crucial for organizing church events, managing staff schedules, and overseeing multiple ministries at a time. Did you thrive in client relationships and building relationships, customer service, or building rapport with colleagues? These skills are essential for pastoral care, building trust with a congregation, and fostering a welcoming church environment. Now, on your resume, there are a couple of ways that you can address these. You've got your resume, you've got your cover letter, and you have your interview. So on your resume, when you're writing the responsibilities, the experience that you have. So maybe it was prepared weekly reports to my bank supervisor, something like that. And you can find a way to write that in a way that will help you, that will sound more ministry related. But I would not make any changes to your title. So don't go adjusting your job title when you're doing this, because if if an organization calls to verify your employment, you want to make sure they're asking for the right title so that they can properly verify. So don't change that. But so let's say maybe you said you planned and executed corporate events. Instead, you might say organized and coordinated, because that just sounds a little more like what people do at church. It's subtle. It's not a big thing, but it can help the lay members of the church who are on the search committees understand better what it was that you did and what you could do at the church. Maybe you managed cross-functional teams to deliver projects on time and within a budget. So you could say, I led collaborative team initiatives, ensuring effective management of resources and timelines to achieve desired outcomes. Something like that might translate more to a church setting. In your cover letter, actively, this is where you make those connections. Connect what you did in the past to the needs of the church. I used to do this in my old job, and it teaches me how to handle this and what you need. That's kind of the structure. I learned how to do this. I did these responsibilities, and that prepared me to do this for what you're asking for. And then in interviews, you become translator. So when they want to know, okay, explain this finance job to me, explain this um, health systems job to me, you will have already done your work to think through how what you did connects with what the ministry needs. In the ministry toolkit, there's a whole page that gives you ways to translate specific things that you might do in a marketplace job, how to translate those to ministry. So I'd encourage you, if that's something you're needing, to go look at the toolkit. And then if you have any questions, I'd love to talk with you about that more. Do we have any questions about this part? All right, interviewing. It's the last part, but it's the big part. You get the interview and you're trying to prepare to go there and do that. Ministry interviews, oh, they are a mix of excitement and anxiety for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You get kind of, you get excited and anxious when you go to interview. Women, however, face additional challenges than just your average man. There's unconscious bias by interviewers and internalized gender bias by us, the interviewees. And that means that women are going to face unseen challenges in that interview space. These challenges can impact our ability to present ourselves well. So we're going to talk through what some of these biases are. It's where I am going to spend the most time today, because I think it's the part that people don't have as much of. So what are some of these biases? So family responsibilities. It is generally assumed, even by some of our most progressive male friends, that women will prioritize family more and in different ways from men, preventing them from being fully present to their job. If this is brought up, if they ask you about how are you going to make it work with your kids, use it as an opportunity to show maturity. Don't say, well, did you ask the guy about this? Be upfront about the ways that you're going to prioritize work. You want to make sure that you say that. But also you can use it as an opportunity to draw boundaries for your family in a way that models a healthy life and work balance. So if it comes up, prepare what your answer will be ahead of time so that you can demonstrate maturity in the face of it, and you make it a non-issue. Like at the end, you want them to feel like, well, that was kind of dumb of me to ask, without you saying to them, that was kind of dumb of you to ask. If that makes sense. Stereotypical roles. So in general, women are often seen as being nurturing and collaborative, but not assertive and decisive. Therefore, bad at leadership. We all know that that's not true. You can demonstrate to them um, that being nurturing and assertive are not mutually exclusive characteristics. Um, in a minute, one of the big things I'll talk about in preparing for interviewing is telling stories. And so this is a really great way. I would have a few stories about what I have done that demonstrate my leadership ability, but also my ability to be empathetic and caring. So maybe you share about a time when you provided some kind of firm guidance to someone, setting clear boundaries, but also demonstrating to them empathy and understanding. Maybe you can describe a situation where you've led a team with supportive and encouraging approach, but also making the tough decisions that a leader has to make while holding people accountable. Stories are a really great way to address some of those biases about our stereotypical roles. Experience. Many women will go into a job interview with less experience than their male colleagues of the same age. And that is often because the opportunities have simply not been there. So you want to spend some time preparing to talk about experience you've attained that the hiring group will not easily recognize. If you're a caretaker in home or a homemaker, you are planning schedules, you are making decisions, you are adjusting those decisions when other things come up. And there was an article that there's an article I'll get, and I'll get it out to you all, that somebody wrote for BWIM, and it gives you some things to say, and I meant to have that for you. I'm sorry I don't. I'll get it to you. But you can talk about those um, different things that you have gained that were not specifically ministry experience. So you're going to want to make sure you develop stories around that experience, so that you can show that you had the experience they're looking for, even though you didn't get it in the way they were expecting you to get it. Okay, bodies. This part, this part stinks. An aspect of unconscious bias against women is that more scrutiny is placed on women's bodies than on men's. And it is unjust that your appearance will be judged more harshly. Period. Point blank. It's not okay. It is a reality. And so I didn't want to leave it out. It's important to be aware of. So as you get ready and choose your attire and your accessories for the interview, you can decide how you want to respond to this. There's lots of ways to respond, and I'm not going to tell you how to. But keeping that in mind as you plan is important. The only thing I do tell people about how to dress for an interview is that it is better to be more dressed up than dressed down. You would rather be overdressed than underdressed. That's the only real advice I would give anybody. But if it's a place that's really hard for you or you're not sure what to do, again, I'm glad to have a conversation with you about this. Okay, and the last one I want to talk about before I see what this brings up for you all are internal biases. We all have biases inside of ourselves. We have voices in our head telling us we're not good enough or we can't do something because history and life has told us that over and over and over again. That can derail our confidence. So do whatever it is you have to do before you go in to quiet those voices. If it's do the Superwoman pose before you go in, there are studies that show that that's helpful. If you need your best bud to give you a pep talk before you go in, you make sure that they are available to do that. I'm also willing to give you a pep talk before your interview if that's what you need. Just set it up with me and I'll make sure that you go in pumped and ready to go. Do everything you can to quiet those voices. Okay, before I go on any farther, Are there anything in this bias section that has brought up questions for you? Okay. If you have any that come up afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out. All right. As you prepare for interviewing, stories are the way to go. I want you to take time developing lots and lots of stories. On the next screen, you'll see a list of stories to prepare. Um, so you can screenshot it or however you want to get it. But you want to take time to come up with stories that demonstrate your leadership, the skills that they are needing in this job description that you are applying for. And one way to do that is to use what's called the STAR method. Okay, STAR. S is specific situation. You want to make sure you tell the specifics of the situation. T is the task you were responsible for. So, whatever it was you were responsible for. So, situation, specific. Task you were responsible for. A, actions that you took in this story. And then the result of your efforts. So, specific situation, task you were responsible for, actions that you took, and the result of your efforts. If you get all four of those, you've got the story pretty complete for them, and it gives them what they need to get the information that they need. All right, so here are some stories that you can prepare as you get ready. I'm actually not going to read it all to you. I'm just going to let you kind of look at it, jot down a few notes. I'll leave it up here for a few minutes while I'm letting you read through those. I've got a couple more slides, but are there any questions overall that have come up? All right, so okay, so when you are telling a story of when you messed up, which you need a couple of those stories because often you will get asked about that. Like I have had people ask me in interviews before, tell me a time you did something wrong and what you learned from it. So you want to be truthful and honest. If you're not sure if it's a good story to tell, like if you're going to interview for a youth ministry position, don't tell a story about how you lost a kid. Okay, tell a story maybe about how you missed the deadline for something and you had to come up with a whole new idea for camp. So kind of think about the stories. But if you're going to tell a story about a time that you messed up, you want to focus on two things: what you learned from it and how you do things differently going forward. So you say what you did, what you messed up, and what do you do from it going forward. In the next slide, they are going to ask you a few questions. I just want to I want to make sure I get everything done. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things. I'm going to go through to the end, and then I can stay on with anybody that has any more questions as long as you want to. So they're going to ask you to describe your experience in ministry. This is where I want you to overcome your years of training to not be braggadocious and brag on yourself. I want you to develop stories around your accomplishments so that you will remember them and not forget them in the midst of an interview. Start by making a list of all of the work you've done that you are proud of. Find ways to include that work and your accomplishments in any answer to any question that they ask you. Because of the ways our society are conditioned to view women, confidence can be seen as a challenge to the traditional understanding of women, and you can be aware of that, but don't let it make you shy from being confident and from bragging on the work that you have done. Because when you talk about what you've done with conviction and with the understanding that God has called you to do these things, you're going to defy stereotypes and challenge that status quo of what it means to be a woman. I am sorry that when you go job searching, you also have to do gender discrimination work. I'm sorry, but it's just there and it happens. And the more prepared we can be, the better. Okay. When they ask you, what are your strengths and weaknesses? They just want to know, do you know yourself? Strengths and weaknesses are often two sides of the same coin. I am a big picture kind of person. I am really great at kind of pulling back and kind of seeing all the moving pieces. I am not awesome at details. So I have different things I've put in place. I have checks and balances to make sure I'm not missing details. I don't have to put that kind of same kind of things in place for the big picture stuff because that's natural. But the details aren't the most natural for me. So I put things in place. When they ask you why you are interested in this position or this church or this ministry, one way to do this is to talk about like what you see doing in that role. Let them know that you can envision where you would want to take this role. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to come in and change everything. Don't make them think that you're going to come in and totally redo how they do things. But you want to show them that you can see down the road in this job. Tell them, I want to be a part of this because I would love to do X, Y, Z. Okay, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Well, I might not make it, y'all. I was going to try. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm the worst at this question um, because I don't think about things that way. But if you have a goal, share it. Most employers know that they are not hiring people forever anymore. So share it. Tell them what it is you want to do. Don't shy away from it. Okay, I've got 30 seconds, so I am not going to try to totally finish here for you. All that was left are questions that you can ask, and then a few like make sure you dress professional, things like that. If you have any more questions or want to talk about anything, I would love to stay on here with you and talk to you about any of that. I've got a little time. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here and coming to our Lunch and Learns. Don't forget, March 4th, we're going to have Reverend Dr. Martha Simmons, and we've got the book club coming up. It's been a delight to be here with you today. I hope this has been helpful. And again, I am here. Part of my job is to help you all. So don't hesitate to reach out if you need something.